And I'll just say this: Josh had a contract in my box um, immediately following the game. Immediately following their game. So he was. They really wanted him. The ownership wanted him. I knew that they may have some coaching changes and things like that, but the ownership was always a big fan of Josh. So I expect great things this season.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's back on for a second time. She had so much fun the first time, she decided to grace us with her presence. Coming live all the way from Indianapolis. She is at the NFL Combine. She's fresh off a Super Bowl visit. She's fresh off the HBCU Combine, HBCU Legacy Bowl, NFL agent extraordinaire, Lady Lib of Lady Lib Sports and Entertainment. Hello, Rasheeda. How are you doing?
Hello, doing well for sure.
We're so happy that you're back on here. You have had a busy year. Wrap up 2024 in a few words. Like, you were busy.
2024. What I would say is taking care of the past, building the future, and really restructuring some things from an agency standpoint. That's 2024. It was a blur. I think I only had 2 guys in my 2024 draft class. And so I think that was a good reset for us. And now in 2025, I picked up 4, and I probably could have picked up 80. As many guys have asked me to represent them over these last months, but we have 4 right now.
And congratulations to those 4 gentlemen, represented by a wonderful agent who looks out for their players first. I have a lot of respect for your guys' agency, just from what I've seen from like the outside, the care that you give these young men, and I definitely have a lot of questions about some of these young men. But first, I want to shine some light on you. You and your team were just in New Orleans at the Super Bowl. Talk to me about that experience. What were you guys doing? And hype yourself up a little bit.
Yeah. We so this was our this was only our second appearance at Super Bowl. So we did Super Bowl in Vegas, but this year we decided we were going to do like kind of activate the agency a little more, and so be a little more present. And host our own kind of hobnob event where people could meet, socialize, have a good time. We always attend the Sports Power Brunch. That is a huge event sponsored by ESPN, NFL Films, Prime Video, several people. And that is focused on the women in the industry, powerful women in the industry. So it's a very closed invitation, but it's always a great event to kind of connect with all of the media and things like that. So we had a great time, did a lot of interviews there, did their red carpet, etc. We accompanied our clients to their events. So NFL Legends, NFL Honors, the Soulful Celebration, anything that they had to do, media role, just taking care of them and making sure that they could be seen, do their autograph sessions, be greeters, sing in the football choir. We had a player that sung in the football choir. So there's a lot of moving pieces just to take care of them. And then we came back exhausted, leaving the Super Bowl.
That sounds like so much fun, especially a place like New Orleans too. Like that is where you want to do a party for a Super Bowl. I'm looking ahead. We're hoping that us as a channel can be on Radio Row next year. And I'm trying to compare the two. I'm like, Santa Clara versus New Orleans. Like, I think New Orleans is probably a little bit more fun.
Yeah. We already booked up all our stuff for next year's Super Bowl weekend.
Let's go.
So we're ready.
Yeah, you're coming to my neck of the woods, California. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm coming out there. We got our hotels. We locked down a lot of stuff for next year just to be ahead of the game.
Speaking of the growth, there's a lot of guys that I want to dive into, and definitely like they're each going to have their moment part of this interview. First one I want to talk about is on the Jacksonville Jaguars, Joshua Cephus. He was an undrafted free agent from last season, made his way onto the practice squad of Jacksonville, cracked the roster at one point, made an appearance. Talk to me about his journey. How does that season go? Like, how you feel from a player perspective and navigating that as an undrafted free agent.
It is. So Josh, there's no doubt that Josh was an exceptional player at UTSA. I mean, set records there, did a great job, was highly touted going into the draft. We knew going into the draft he would probably be a later round draft pick. just based on the size of the school, some other things with testing and things like that, and the depth of the wide receiver class. So we knew that we already were probably in that late round perspective. Now, what surprised me was the practice roster. I'll be honest, but I do know that it's the NFL. And although you may be a great college player, it takes a while to become a great NFL player. And so he did do practice roster. He was elevated. Once he's traveled with the team as like consistently traveled with the team because they always felt like he would be like next man up. And then he elevated with the Titans. And so we went over to that game and was able to see him actually get on the field and do some things, do some heavy blocking. And it is a challenge when you're used to being a star and now you have to be the guy that kind of is on the developmental squad. But what I would like to say is Josh made practice squad player of the week several times. And
Nice.
so I knew coming out of the season with the Jags, there's always a choice of whether a team will keep a guy or re-invite him back right away. And I'll just say this, Josh had a contract in my box um, immediately following the game. Immediately following their game. So they really wanted him. The ownership wanted him. I knew that they may have some coaching changes and things like that, but the ownership was always a big fan of Josh. So I expect great things this season.
That's sensational. And yeah, you pop on the tape of Josh and it just pops at UTSA. Shout out to the Roadrunners. Like I almost want to say like, does he want to come over to Los Angeles? Because there's definitely
Now they tried at one point, but I had another client over there at that time, and I was like, that wouldn't be I didn't want that to happen. But Josh,
yeah.
after the draft, just there were probably about 16 teams that wanted him, and so he had heavy, heavy, heavy traction. He was a highly, he's what we would call a very high PFA, meaning that anytime you get 50% of the teams calling immediately begging for him, you got something. So he'll be somewhere this year. He's with the Jags today, so I hope they retain him, keep him. But I wouldn't want to see him fall into a practice roster again because another team is going to come get him immediately. They're not going to allow that. So he's done in his off season. He's working on, of course, postseason workouts. He just did a huge branding shoot with us. He has some vendors that have given him some things that he'll be kind of modeling, and he's taken up golf. He's a golfer now.
Okay.
So, um, yeah, he's doing great. So he's preparing and relaxing his mind a little bit, but preparing to come back for year two.
That's good. Like, I mean, you got to have a life outside of football. Like, especially if that young, early 20s, there's a lot of worse things that guys could be getting into hobby
Yeah,
wise. And
yeah.
especially sports. Like, I mean, you got to be happy he's not like picking up snowboarding or playing pickup every day.
Right. I do know someone who did that and tore their hand up.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. The, yeah, I have to say, like, and this is actually a perfect segue because a player like Joshua Cephus, like, you watch him play so phenomenally in college and be a star, and then you're like, well, what is really the difference between what they can do in college versus the pros? And a lot of people, a lot of teams fall in love with the 40 time and the shuttle time. But it's like just pop
Hmm.
on the tape and watch these guys play. And speaking of guys who can play, you were just at Legacy Bowl, the HBCU Legacy Bowl, HBCU Combine. Now you're at the NFL Combine in Indy. Some of your new additions to the family were at the
Yeah.
HBCU Combine Legacy Bowl. One guy in particular, I want you to talk about a little bit. I'm actually excited for. I hope the Rams look at him a little bit. Irv Mulligan. Talk to me about Irv.
Irv we trust. First of all, Irv is a fun client. I can't explain it, but he is just he's we call him the smile without smiling. The personality just comes through even if he's sitting still just talking to you. He has quite the personality. He's a great guy. But Irv has a phenomenal run game. The vision, the strength in his lower body, how he's able to shed blocks very easily. Um, they can't get him. They don't want, that's not a guy that you want to meet coming through the hole. Like you don't want to meet him. He has a very, he's very confident in his game. I told him he's my typical running back. Like I call him a Devo sometimes. I'm like, not a diva, a Devo. Like, yeah, just give me the ball and I'll show you what to do with it, right? He has a history of exceptional yards per carry. He's not a guy that's going to lose you yards. He's a guy that's going to achieve them, and he's just a playmaker. I
Yeah.
think at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, they wanted to. The feedback that we consistently got from teams, as I met with teams about Irv, was we want they used him so much in running, they didn't use his hands often. So he wasn't
Not,
receiving the
yeah.
ball, wasn't taking passes. But he showed that and demonstrate that, yeah, I can. That's just not something that I was utilized for. And then number two, his blocking. Irv is not scared to put his hands on you. So I think the blocking, the receptions, the rushing, if you put that all together, you got a full package in Irv Mulligan.
I'm really hoping to see his stock rise really like quickly. Did he get an invite to Indy as well, or are we waiting for his pro day to see him again?
They do
Media.
pro days. So the
Yep.
way because the NFL does the HBCU combine, the
Hmm.
NFL runs the HBCU combine just like the national combine.
Okay.
And so in their minds, they don't it would be just doing the same thing. So Mark Gorzak, who is the famous he's been doing, I think he told me he's been doing the combine for 26 years.
Wow.
Mark Gorzak does the same combine training. So the NFL comes and does the full HBCU combine on Monday of that week. And then they exit and then the bowl team takes over and does the bowl workouts and things like that. But the
Okay.
NFL runs that combine
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm aware of the
completely.
NFL running it. I just wasn't sure like how much overlap there is because HBCU in general has been getting a lot more attention, not just from folks
Hmm.
like me, but national media and independent media and creators such as myself. So it
Yeah.
is nice to see a lot of these guys. And for the folks that like have not followed Irv Mulligan's story, he's at running back at a Jackson State. Some of his numbers, and I really want to shout him out because I was not aware of how phenomenal of a year he had.
Yeah.
5'9", 198, ran a 4.58 40, but he popped on the game tape and he's a lot faster than 4.58. Like some guys just
Yeah,
have
yeah.
game
And teams
speed.
had a range. Teams had a nice range. They had 4.51, 4.53, 4.55, 4.58. And so they kind of settle on a number if that makes sense. But
Yeah,
every team runs their own clock. So there's some teams that are like, nah, he was a 4.51 for me. So I'm like, take it.
we will take
Go
that.
ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, not at all. Like that input from you is important, but it's is just one. There's one statistic I wanted to point out that I was not aware of. So Jackson State University, Irv Mulligan broke Walter Payton's single season rushing record. He had 1,245 yards and 13 touchdowns. Anytime your name can be put in anything with someone a great like Walter Payton, you should pay attention to this person.
Yeah.
What's a moment like that for someone in your family now? That like, hey, you broke Walter Payton's record. Like, what's that
Yeah.
like?
And part of the reason why he wanted to go to Jackson State, because Irv started at Wofford
Hmm.
College in South Carolina. And part of the reason why he wanted to go to Jackson State, he was driven by the story of Walter Payton. And he's an old soul. So if you know Irv, he's a very old soul. I'm like, there is an
Okay.
80-year-old man inside that guy. But he said I was driven by sweetness. And so I wanted to be, I wanted to go there. I wanted to touch the ground that he walked on and then to beat his record. I don't think Irv even fully understands what that means historically for Jackson State. Not yet cuz he's in the moment, right? But
Yeah.
he'll look back 20, 30 years from now and go, "Wow, I beat the Walter Payton's record." So, he did good. He did well, very well. He's a
Good is a
production horse.
good is an understatement. No, that's at some
Great.
point he's gonna tell his future kids about
You
the
know who
fact
I
like sweetness better recognize. Nah, he's looking
am?
to like that is ridiculous. I just wanted to shout him out a little bit because that's understated how phenomenal of a season that is and be represented by you. How does before we jump into the other guys, you mentioned like some teams asking about things that he can and can't do. Obviously, everyone's diving into the players that they have their eyes on. What are those conversations like? Is it just fielding random calls all day? Do you have days set aside to talk about certain players? Like it's part of the day to
Yeah,
day with
so
that in off season.
our initial plan as an agency, first of all, I don't sign any. I don't sign any client unless I talk to the team about them first. I talk to the league before I sign them and tell me what you know, tell me about character, and I do my due diligence before I sign them. They had the Celebration Bowl, so it took it allowed me more time to kind of work on them. But the way the country is divided by teams, it's regional. So my guys that are in Florida sometimes have a different representative than the guy in Mississippi or than the guy in Texas or a
Mm,
guy in Ohio. So you're talking to all different scouts, even though they may work for the same team. There's some that don't know who Irv Mulligan is because they don't cover that area.
okay.
So what I tend to do is I look for the scout that covers the group of those areas, and then I call on them and we have relationship. I may text them and say, "Hey, tell me what you know about Herb. I'm going to give you a call. Let's talk about it." So it's that kind of relationship. Luckily, I have Rob and Herb at the same school, so they're the same coverage area. And we get the feedback from them, and from there we sign them. And the all of the negative scout report, anything negative in a scout report, we review with them because that's how we develop their training plan. I'm going to
That's
send you to
that's
go get
good.
training where I feel like it's going to answer a question. And then when we get to combines and pro days, I'm specifically asking you to do those things that they thought you couldn't do.
That's such an understated part of probably this whole dynamic between agent, any support team, and any player because you're so used to hearing, and in this day and age of instant gratification, what you're good at. Hey, you're so awesome. Comments
Mhm.
and social media to be able to look a guy in the eye, like a young man, early 20s, and say, "Hey, you need to work on A, B, and C, and this is how we're going to do it."
Mhm.
That's a big character check. Like a lot of
Yeah.
guys, I'm sure you probably spoke to
Oh, they
some
got the
young gentlemen.
egos. They got the egos.
You said
I
it, not me.
met, I met, I met parents, and when I told them where I thought their son would end up or what he was coming up on as far as draft grade, they didn't want to hear that. And they went
Mm,
to agencies that sold them a dream. And I'm like, you go and you go and sell that dream. So if you go to the agency that represents Tyreek Hill and they say, well, we represent Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Alvin Kamara, I'm just throwing those names out there. Love all of those guys.
mm.
Um, but the issue is you're not them.
Yeah,
I don't get any agency that tells you who they represent is just blowing smoke. They need to tell you what's the plan for you. And if you're not that first round, second round, third round guy, you better have an agent that's not going to put you at the bottom of the stack. Because if they have 10 to 15 people, you as a late round PFA, they are not giving you any attention on those calls with those teams. They can't.
yeah.
Because the team only wants to talk about the other. They don't want to talk about you, and so they're not going to waste the team's time talking about you. So you wonder where your draft stock goes, and you wonder how that works. Just know you're at the bottom of the pile.
And then definitely not like a shot at any of the agencies, but there's there's a fine balance because the guys who are like first rounders, it's like they probably don't even need that much work because
They
I
don't do
mean
any work.
they're
Yeah,
already blue chip guys. It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
the
yeah.
the day
They're,
two
they're
guys
already
that
well
there's
defined.
yeah, there's day two guys that move and shift based on some of those conversations that are happening that you're doing up in Indy, and then those late round guys or those undrafted guys that hey, this is a great player and they need an advocate like
Mhm.
you to even put them on the radar of some of these scouts.
Got to put them on the radar.
Man,
The advocacy is where the work is, and if I could give any advice to a player that is kind of in that late to PFA realm, you better get an agency that has a history of actually working those type of players because it's a whole different level of agency. When you're dealing with a first round, second round, I'm here at the combine. Drew Rosenhaus is here, David Malgetta is here, excellent. Nicole Lynn, who I admire, those are excellent agencies. But what they're working on now is more of where do I get this guy drafted? How do we negotiate that team to take the pick higher? If he wants to go there, right there, it's a different level of agency in those realms. It's not. here, do you know about my guy? That's not the conversations we're having at Combine.
At the
They're working
combine.
on marketing deals. They're working on pre-negotiation of what would be in a contract. It's just way different, way different. So our HBCU guys, I'm like, be careful when you go with the agencies that don't have a history of working
That's
those
it's
levels.
that is again a great nugget of knowledge of, yeah, you want to be represented by somebody who has experience working in HBCU. And like I commented
Yeah.
before, HBCU I feel like is getting a lot more attention, not just from
Mhm.
major, but a lot of independents. I see a lot more independents like myself and creators online talking about, they call them draft gems, hidden guys that aren't getting attention. So let's give
Yeah.
some of those guys some attention. We talked about Irv a little bit, his teammate at Jackson State. I'm looking at all these guys for my favorite team, the Rams, just because these are actually key areas that, like, hey, my team could benefit for some of these players, especially in these late rounds. It's great coaching staff. Jackson State did great as well. Rob McDaniel, you mentioned Rob already.
Rob,
I'm
yes.
gonna I took an excerpt from ESPN about some things he excels at, just to get the fans familiar. This is straight from ESPN. McDaniel has played multiple spots in secondary. Check, love that. Best fit potentially nickel safety. In Jackson State Celebration Bowl over South Carolina State, his team needed him to play outside. Performed well on the big stage. Athletic, size. He's 6'2", 213. That is,
Big
I love
boy
that. I love that. Um, yeah, his name's being mentioned by coaches and staff coming out of that week all week. Talk to me a little bit about
all
Rob.
week. Rob had 23 interviews,
Okay.
23 NFL interviews at the HBC Combine. Rob was definitely the most touted defensive player at the Combine as well as the HBCU Legacy Bowl. He is a guy, and it's interesting because safeties, they do their jobs. So they're
Yeah.
not when you think about my running backs, my receivers, it's kind of even
Yeah.
I feel sorry for D linemen. They're like, I got a nose tackle that works his butt off. But no one talks about the nose tackle. No one talks about the nose tackle. But he's out there manhandling, doing double teams, right? All day long, working his butt off. But the safeties are kind of like that too. You don't pay attention as much until they're, en route. But nobody's gonna pass a ball. Nobody's gonna pitch a ball over to Rob's side. They're just not gonna do it. Because
Especially
Rob
that
is that
size.
good. Yeah, that Rob, when Rob walked into the space, the way the teams looked at him, they said, if you look at a guy in this room that looks the part, he is the man. I mean, he stood out amongst his peers. He's big, not only big, he's long, right? 78-inch wingspan. There are some D linemen that don't have that, right?
Mm.
He was muscular, right? He's not, when you look at his weight, there's no soft spots. He's just rocked up everywhere.
We
So I
we
told him,
call it a first off
you
the bus kind of guy.
yeah, I told him you not only have show muscles, you got go muscles because they actually work. But Rob is a humble guy as well. He did a really good job of working the room and making sure he talked to all of the media, met with all of the teams to exhaustion. When I got here, I'm walking through the hallway at the combine trying to get to an event over in the convention center. Uh, I'm on the phone and a guy walks up and he says, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, I was just thinking about you. He said, I said, "Did you see Rob?" And I saw his face and I remember we talked about Rob before. I said, "Did you get information on Rob's performance at HBCU Legacy Bowl?" He said, "Oh, did I?" He said, "I already told the team he's coming with us." And then I move around, I get off the phone, and the person on the phone was like, "Man, he really like Rob." I get to the doorway of the event. Another guy says, "Hey, Rob's coming with us. Rob, we want Rob. He's our guy." So Rob is definitely going to make some noise this draft. I think he's in there. A lot of teams are in love with him. There were teams that before the event they told me don't mention Rob to anyone else. We want to keep him a secret. There were teams who said, "How many teams are you talking to about him?" And I'm like, oh, I've been talking to. Don't talk to any other team. He's coming with us.
Make it
So
one.
there's a lot of teams that are loving Rob McDaniel. He's an
Yeah,
excellent player,
I
very
love
physical.
I love hearing that. So for the casual fan who doesn't know like why important this is, because that means his paycheck is potentially getting bigger as the weeks progress in this offseason because the more teams that want you, the higher you are, the higher your draft stock is going to go. And that means that first rookie check, like there's tiers to it. That's more money that he's
There's
potentially going
tears.
to get. And I'm a fan. Do whatever you got to do. Any player, make as much money as possible because you never
Yep.
guaranteed another season, another game.
Yeah.
Um,
Not for long is what the NFL stands for. Not for long.
or I always call it the no fun league because they like them and them
That's so
touchdown
funny.
them touchdown celebrations still irk me. Um, I got like Rob. You mentioned a good point, something that I think about all the time. Some guys are great; they have the gift of gab. How much work do you have to do with just every player in general when it comes to media training or even marketing training? Like, I know you have
Mm,
a specialized team for that. Wonderful,
mhm.
fantastic team. How much work goes into that, and can you give us a snippet of that without giving away the
Yeah,
secret sauce?
they start media training immediately. Sometimes even before they get to their training facility or start their physical training. But no matter that's part of the deal. No matter how tired you are, no matter how exhausted you are, you got to get on your media training because you never know, right? First and Tuna can call and say, "Hey, I want to meet with you," and I'm like, "Oh, you got to get. We don't want to get them ready." The biggest thing going into a combine is we want to prepare them with all the questions that the NFL is going to ask. And so we have those. And so we want to make sure that they know everything that they need to know and answer in a way that they should, based sometimes on the team. So if I
Mm,
know, we know certain, we know inside details for different teams and different people on what they like, what they want to hear, and what previous players have done. And so we give them that insight very early, whether they're doing a Zoom call with a media outlet, whether they're doing the Path to Draft with the NFL Network. Both Rob and Irv interviewed with the NFL Network and did extremely well in their interviews. Um, so we prepare them for all those different facets, but the most important interview is how to get the job. And so we want to make sure that they're prepared when they sit down. So Rob coming in, because we had a lot of his interactions already preset, him and Irv, when they landed in New Orleans on Saturday, they started interviewing. So they were interviewing far ahead of their peers,
oh wow,
far ahead of their peers.
that's
So by the
a
time
great
they got to the
feeling.
combine, they knew, because the other thing with combine is teams come in for the combine but may not stay for the Legacy Bowl, or other teams come in for the bowl. It's just different. Different teams may come in for the combine portion because that's the NFL combine,
Yeah,
right? And so they're getting their interviews on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But a new team comes in to review the film and look at them on the field and practices. So we wanted to make sure the combine scouts got the inside because those are feeding this combine with their combine notes, if that makes sense.
gotcha. That
It's a
does make sense.
strategy. It's a strategy. And I felt bad for the guys who were represented, um, but there's no presence from their agents. You got to be present
Is
for these
that
kind of things.
is it just kind of put guys at ease? And I do have one follow up question about the interview process, but does it help a lot of your guys like kind of feel a little bit more comfortable going through this process? Because this is people who don't know, like these interviews are little job interviews. Like you could
Hmm.
completely have a team write you off as, hey, like a character flaw, character issue. We don't like this guy's leadership
Hmm.
ability from these interviews. Like these are more important than the
Yeah.
physical part for a lot of these guys.
Can't look me in the eye, right? Those kind of things. Shakes my hand very soft. Um,
Wow.
just doesn't, maybe shy, right? Rob's gonna kill me for saying this, but Rob is shy. Rob is shy. So it takes him a minute to warm up to you. And so telling the teams that ahead of time helps them to create more ease. And they're like, well, what do I need to do? Like, how do I break the ice with him? Right. So they're asking too, like, how do we
Yeah.
break the ice so that we get the best out of him? They're like, so many people were like, Irv is a character. We don't like Irv sat down and before I knew it, we were talking about all kinds of stuff, right? Because Irv is just that kind of personality. They're very different people. So you also have to tamper, you have to kind of tell the Irv, who is very open, like, okay, Irv, we probably don't need to share that much information. Like, but Rob, you have to say, Rob, you got to tell him that you're training. I'm just taking care of my body. No, 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 no. You are at a very great training facility
Hmm.
that's invested in your nutrition, your physical therapy, you have a position coach, you have a strength coach, you have like tell them what you're doing. It's not as general as everybody does not have that investment in their training.
It is. It drives me wild when I hear stories about that of like guys who either lackadaisical with the training or like their diet is awful. Like I know the most infamous one is Ocho
Mhm.
Cinco eats McDonald's like every day, but he is like zero
Yeah,
percent body fat. Like if I have a fry
yeah,
right now, I'm gonna feel bloated for 3 days. I don't understand.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
The people
understand.
always. My husband has a theory on that. He's like, Ocho's not eating like that. He's like, quit telling these kids that you're not doing that. Don't say that.
Or
You're
like,
not
I
doing
think DK. I think DK Metcalf over in Seattle. I think he's infamous where he's like he eats candy every day or something like that. Um,
that. Yeah.
and then, not to say this is a segue because you mentioned the bigger guys. You mentioned the nose tackles. You mentioned we call them the big nasties up front. So
Yeah.
you
I
got
got one this year.
talk to me about him. He's next on my list. I want to share some love with him out of TCU. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, so Nana, he played for Notre Dame for 4 years.
Hmm.
Extremely the thing that I love about Nana is he's extremely, and I hate to say intelligent because it makes it seem like players aren't intelligent. It's not in that way, but he's um very methodical in how he approaches his game and how he approaches everything in life. He's a natural leader. He's the guy that's always going to be in the huddle breaking down things. He's always the guy to pump up. His media training has been flawless because he's such a great speaker. And he's very confident in himself. So Nana is a guy that he turns into a different person on the football field. One of the nicest guys, big teddy bear, but on the field he's a grizzly bear. So he can play. He is what I call kind of like a ET, extraterrestrial. He can play edge or he can play tackle. So ETs are very useful in the NFL, and so he's training right now in Florida.
Look at what happened in Philly. Like, and for guys like for Nana, full name. I hope I'm saying this correctly. Nana Osafo-Mensah, correct?
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
got it.
yep.
Defensive lineman out of TCU. Um, does it help when you have a game like the Super Bowl that happened where, credit to the entire team and the organization, but that defensive line really stole the show where they just completely
Yes, it did.
obliterated the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
that help like defensive linemen in a draft immediately after where it's like, do you feel like teams are
yes,
have feeling an urgency to pick up more defensive linemen, probably more than before, or is that
yes.
just kind of a
I
not a thing?
I heard last night. I actually heard last night here, talking to one of the NFL teams. They were having dinner next to us, and we ended up kind of talking with them. They were like, "This is a trenches draft. This is a trenches draft. Last year was quarterbacks and receivers.
Hmm.
This year, you're not going to see a bunch of receivers drafted. I think if they get drafted, it'll be very late. It's not a big receiver draft.
Hmm.
But this draft will be the D line. It's going to be D ends, defensive tackles, O line, and guards.
Hmm.
That's where it's going to be. I think it's like people woke up and was like, wait a minute. I got a great quarterback, but I don't have anybody to protect him. And then other people are like, this quarterback, we got to shut him down. So I think this is a good time. It's a deep draft class though for D linemen, very deep.
I'm
D linemen
I'm
and running
seeing that.
backs, very deep,
Yeah, I'm
very
seeing
deep.
that. What's this? The insider, not Ian Rappaport. Adam Schefter made a comment on Pat McAfee show yesterday about that he didn't. What he's hearing from a lot of teams is that there's not a big difference between maybe somebody you can get at number 10 or number 20 versus somebody in the third round. And I didn't like how he framed that. I framed that as that there is so much talent. Like this is and people say top heavy or not, but this is a
Hmm.
deep draft, like you're saying, that there's not a lot of difference between somebody that you can get maybe end of the first round versus hell fifth round. and that
Yeah, no one.
speaks to talent.
He's saying there's no standout. There's not a lot of standouts.
Okay.
So there's going to be, and there's not a clear, like, these are the top best D linemen. That's not clear. And so the reason, so when you get to a point like this where you have deepness, like depth like this,
Hmm.
um, you have to also, now they're getting to fit. So those interviews are going to be very important.
Okay.
They're getting to fit. They're getting to the packages that they can utilize them in. Um, and they're getting to a lot of that off the field personal interaction, like what's the best fit for the long
Hmm.
haul. So I think those are going to be the deciding factors more than I think today. So today, the combine results, the testing is going to show, kind of give a little bit of a blip, but believe it or not, most teams know how you're going to test. There's not a lot of surprises in testing.
I try
It's
to
just confirmation.
thank you. I love that you just said that because that's exactly what I was going to say. That it's not a like, oh, I'm so surprised this guy ran a 4.4. Like, no, it's we see the tape. This is confirmations to show that you can show up and do the physical part as well as interview really well.
Yeah.
Um, what is the biggest? Obviously, getting guys to combines and getting guys to like perform physically at their best and the interview process, like you talked about. What do you feel is your biggest task on your to-do list between now and the draft in April of getting these guys ready?
Yeah. So right now we're getting them set up for exposure, a lot more exposure. We set up already our local day visits. So our players like Nana, he'll be visiting his local day, likely with the Dallas Cowboys. We'll also have another player with the Falcons, Sheldon.
Hmm.
So we hope to get those local days set up. That's just a that's just a standard for us. If you live or kind of grew up in the city or went to high school in the city, we're gonna get you in the local days. I've always been successful with that. I think I have a 90%. I think we calculated like a 90 or 87% rate our agency of getting players into local days. That's pretty standard.
Okay.
Um, but the top 30 visits. Now it's time to get them in the top 30 visits. And a lot of people don't understand the top 30 visit and what that means. Some people believe it's the top 30 players, and that's not the case.
Hmm.
Really, for teams, top 30 visits are the ones that they miss. So when they look at all of the results of the pro days, so we're getting ready for pro days, right? I have two in Big 12 Pro Day. Big 12 Pro Day is just like the NFL Combine right now. It's going to be aired on the NFL Network. Nana's going to be in there from TCU. My other player from UCF, Sheldon Arnold, is going to be in there.
Shout out to Sheldon.
So they'll be in the Big 12 Pro Day. So we got to get through Big 12 Pro Day, which is their pro day, and then we got to get through Jackson State's pro day. I do want Rob and Irv to do some additional things at those pro days to kind of get them further in the green than where they are today. Um, but once we leave pro day, the teams kind of measure up and do all of their analysis. They do like a number crunching to say, like, hey, this guy is green on all 5 tests, and I don't know, and he has a pretty good fit, like film grade. I don't know him. We need to get him in here. And so that's where you're going to get the top 30 visits, the Zoom calls, the coaches' connections. Like if I have a team that tells me, hey, we really want Rob, I tell them you need to get your coach on the call with him as soon as possible. So once they get that relationship with the coach, I can kind of gauge like how did it feel? Did he ask you the right questions? So if you happen to be an after the draft guy, we kind of know where you feel most comfortable at. We can get you there. So this is kind of the groundwork of building media, building exposure to the teams, getting those top 30 visits, and really solidifying the local days and trying to make the deals happen, whether it be post draft or end of the draft, or post draft or late round in the draft.
See that's actually information more new to me. I've heard of top 30, and I had a concept of what I thought it was, but top 30 is essentially like making sure they didn't miss anybody fall between the cracks of like, so you don't
Yeah.
have a Brock Purdy situation of how the heck is this guy the last pick in the draft
Yeah.
when he does so well and everything. That's
Yeah. A lot
that's
of guys
tough.
don't understand, and it's kind of scary. So NFL Combine, so the guys that are here at the Combine, sometimes they're so busy. right? I had teams that missed Irv and Rob last week at Combine. They were like, we never got to them, right? So they never got the chance to put their eyes on them directly, have a conversation. And so that's a way for them to say, you know what, I'm going to slip him in here, right? Or let's say that they really need to draft a quarterback and they're down to the wire on the three guys that they really want. They're going to bring those three guys in for the top 30 because it's kind of like a final interview. So
Hmm.
it's to also get those final details of who you want to draft high, like the high draft picks, but it's also like, who did I miss and who do I need to get to know? During the top 30 visit, they do a physical exam. That's why it's so important for you to get either a combine invite or a top 30 visit, because once they have your medical on file, that gives them a little more leeway and understanding to get you drafted. No one gets drafted high in this league without a medical exam.
Okay.
Teams do not draft without medical exams. They just don't do it. So it may be a situation like I had with Xavier Smith for the Rams.
Hmm.
Xavier, probably a day or two, I want to say the day before day one of the draft, I get a call from a team, 7 o'clock at night. It's 8 o'clock down in Florida where Xavier is, and they're like, we need an EKG. We need an EKG. Like, and I'm like, we're missing an EKG. So I'm calling, I'm getting his mom, and she's rushing. She's going to get Xavier. He's playing with his nephew down the block, and she's trying to, we did all these things, and Xavier went and got that EKG. They scanned it to me. We scanned it to the team doctor. They wanted that EKG on file because they cannot draft without a medical exam. So there should never be a time a player is sitting in front of their TV on day three, thinking they're getting drafted if they've not met with a team and they've not had any type of medical. It's not happening.
I'm learning so much today. And shout out to Xavier. Us being Los Angeles Rams fans are very familiar with Xavier. Had some big plays this year.
Yeah.
And then that another perfect segue. Like you mentioned, another HBCU player. I really want to dive into this, and hopefully, I'm not taking too much time out of your day.
No.
Your agency has a huge commitment to at least draft one, bring into your family, but also get one HBCU player drafted every draft.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide when you were building your business, and this is probably expanding outside of just football, that you wanted to make that commitment, like as one of your philosophies, as your core business? Talk to me a little bit about that and how
Yeah.
that's helped you grow.
There was a lot of talk about how HBCU players were being left out of the draft, like not getting drafted. But then I did an analysis and realized how many were actually on NFL teams. And I said, this number should be much higher. And with the right advocacy, so I did a little bit of digging as I was getting started with this. And I found that they often don't have the right advocacy. They tend to sign with the bigger agencies that don't prioritize them. And they don't have the right strength and conditioning sometimes for the next level. Um, and they don't have kind of like just the training and development. And so I said, well, what we do for our Big 12, SEC, Big 10, what we do for our P4 guys, G5 guys, we're going to do the exact same thing for at least one HBCU player a year. And so that was my goal. And we've been pretty successful. We've had Ronnie Thomas, who went to the CFL. We had Xavier Smith went to the Rams. Davis Richard would have went anywhere probably that he wanted to had he not gotten injured
Yeah.
in the bowl game. But one of I'm going to say the best HBC quarterback of our time as of right now, of our time.
Set a lot of records.
Davis Richard, and of course working with Irv and Rob. And I worked with so many: Keyshawn James from Fayetteville State, Nigel Peel from Fayetteville State, Akil Greer from St. Aug. I worked with so many HBCU guys through this process that I was like, I'm never going to let that go. I'm going to invest in them just like I would invest in others. I'm going to advocate for them just like I would advocate for others, because I've seen them so deprioritized by other agencies, but also by the league in many ways.
And for a lot of folks who are maybe unfamiliar on why this is happening, it's, you kind of mentioned before, it's almost like a scarcity of time and resources. Like I think a lot of scouts, other agents, teams in general in the league, they feel like, if it's not broke, why, don't fix it. Like they feel like they get their core guys here, but there's so many guys that fall between the cracks that, they're at HBCUs by choice. Like they went to historically black
Mm-hmm.
colleges because they want to be there. That shouldn't limit
They want
their
to be there.
ability to now go make a living playing a game they love. And there's been a
Yeah.
huge, not just folks like yourself, but down to the coaching staff and funding to HBCUs. You got Coach Prime being the biggest name to coach in an HBCU now. He's at Colorado, but you have more and more former NFL players coming. You got Tyron Wheatley, Michael Vick, Deshaun Jackson recently, Eddie George. How do you see that wave of former NFL players going and coaching and being in admin roles, HBCUs, helping the cause that you're helping as well? How do you see that wave
Yeah,
transcending?
I want them to be about the kids, right? Because I think having just because you're a former player does not make you a former coach, a good coach,
Very
right?
true.
A
Yeah.
good coach. It's just like saying that everybody that teaches needs to be a principal. Not necessarily, right? It's a different leadership style. You got to actually know the game, and you got to know the game holistically. So I think more than I think they bring a level of notoriety to the team and to the school. But I definitely want to double click and say who's the coaching staff you have underneath,
Mm.
because that coaching staff has to develop. And I'm hoping they will also bring their resources to invest in film quality as well as the strength and conditioning program and the meal plans. If you give me a guy with the right strength and conditioning, the right meal plan, and the right film so that teams can look at it, because I've had situations where I represented a player at a school and the team told me, the NFL shared with me, I only got 2 games in the system from them.
That
And now
not
I got to
helpful.
go and chase down the school and say, get your film uploaded. And what's sad about that is there's other agents that represent players at that school. They never did that work. If that makes sense. They
Oh my
never
gosh.
even they didn't even realize that their player doesn't even have film in the system for the NFL because they're not doing that level of work. But in that particular situation, I called the school. By the end of that night, that all the film was uploaded. I called the team back. They said, I got the film. Thank you very much. And now the whole NFL has the film. Thank you. But he was like, I called other agents. I called the other agent, a couple other agents that represent players there. They're like, I can get anything out of them, but thank you for getting this resolved for us. So it is, it's that kind of advocacy, right? It's that kind of advocacy that is important when they go and coach at these schools. It's like you can bring the notoriety, but bring the wealth of the land and bring what you know from other colleges to the HBCU land. It's important.
That I'm just imagining there's some poor GA at that school that like got a call in the middle of the night of like, hey, we need to upload stuff because the coaches probably aren't going to upload it. It's some GA like that has to go through.
You're right. Some GA is like, huh? And uploading. I mean, it's just small things, right? Like, where are the stats? Where's the film?
Updating the
Because
website.
if you
Yep.
yeah, update your website. If you got to update the stats, and I think about PFF. PFF, when you click on the versions of PFF that we have, when you click on plays, if I click on tackles
Hmm.
and I see a player has 16 tackles, PFF will run those 16 tackles for me.
Yeah.
But guess what? It'll be a black screen where there's no film.
That's
Where a
so.
where a coach where an NFL scout can go and say, "Give me the 16 tackles from an Ohio State guy." Boom, 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 boom. All 16 tackles are right there. They're clean. They're crisp. The film quality is excellent. You go to our HBCUs and you see black.
And
They don't have film.
and I
So how do you grade it?
I'm hoping that mentality that you have kind of it starts getting carried over to all these programs because what do they say? A rising tide raises all ships. Um, like
Yes,
you got to help those ships. Like if you help your players, that's going to help you in return. Like that's more like you said, notoriety for
yes,
your school. Um,
yes,
do you see that being a next natural step for these HBCUs, like growing?
yes. The next natural step, the HBC. I see a lot of the wealth of the land. Like if you go down to Jackson State, you can tell Dion's been there, right? They have it was a good launch pad. I think Coach O, TC, Quinn, those guys down there, they're doing a great job of building it even more, and they built it. They took that platform and that elevation of, oh, okay, we had a Dion here, and they took that and said, but we can do these things for our guys. So if you look at Jackson State, they really have been productive enrolled. So I'm hoping that that happens with all of the HBCUs.
I hope so too. And then, I mean, the wisdom that you're sharing with us today is not just helping, obviously, if any other HBCU players are watching, your guys are watching, getting some nuggets from you. We have a lot of high school athletes that watch this show as well, getting to know, lesser known guys that the major media isn't covering. Do you have any words of wisdom for anybody that fits that demographic for them that maybe they want to take that next step to be that guy in college and hopes to make it to the league? I know you got a young athlete that you're still raising yourself. So maybe you can take some of those nuggets and drop it here for some of our guys watching.
Man. Oh God,
shout him out too.
He drives me crazy. He drives Malik Liberty. If just follow MJ Lib 14 on Instagram, and encourage him to post his film. He is the most hard headed, humble guy that I ever seen in my life. He's like they need, he's like, they need to just come see me. I'm like, nobody cares about you. You got to get out there. So he doesn't want me to agent him, but I definitely agent him. But I will say, he's a junior at Concordia Lutheran and was rated number 14 in the state of Texas. And he's doing a lot of junior day visits. So I'm very proud of my son.
Wow.
But the advice that I give to my high school athletes, be consistent. Be consistent. It's not going to be handed to you. No one's coming down to your school to say, I got to have that guy. Just know that you can be easily funneled out. It's that easy. There are guys that did not test at the HBCU Legacy Bowl that fell backwards because they let other players get ahead of them because they did not test. No place are you going to have 32 teams looking at you. They're not 32 teams are not coming to your school. And those kind of things. So take advantage of every opportunity is probably the next lesson. Be on time and stay late.
I love that.
Take notes from your coaches. Be respectful. The biggest thing you can do in high school, have the grades. Why is that important? Right now with the portal, the transfer portal, they don't need high school players. They don't need you to fill the funnel. And now with the JUCO not counting against you, the guys are going to JUCO and they get them out the portal. They don't need you that bad. So if you're consistent, you have good grades, you're respectful, punctual, and committed to the game. Those are the things that are going to set you up for success in the long run. It's that level of commitment. And watch what you eat. I say that as a plus size woman. But definitely,
I'm filling my McDonald's from yesterday. Trust me.
Yeah, I tell my son, drink your water and get your rest. 5'5" running backs don't really make it to the NFL. 5'9" quarterbacks don't make it to the NFL. So you gotta just rest and take your vitamins, take care of your body because that's the asset that you have.
But essentially, be a professional because there's if there's a 16, 17-year-old watching this, there's another 16, 17-year-old in the next town over that is probably doing it better than you right now. And he's going to get the attention before you. It's tough love. It's an ego check for a lot of guys too.
Get to these mega camps this summer in June too. Get to the mega camps to be seen. And a lot of guys pick the big mega camps, right? Yeah. I'm going to USC. I'm going to, going to UCLA. Yep. I love those schools as well, but do not dismiss D2, D3 focus camps as well, because the offers are going to be very, very hard to get in these next years as we go through the trenches with the portal.
Oh yeah, portal is a whole other. We're going to have a third visit from you to kind of talk about the portal with us because there's a lot of things I don't understand. I have one final question for you. I left it off of our script here because it actually came in today from one of my good friends. Shout out to Malik Meisenheimer in Sacramento. He has a question, and then I'll let you go do your agent stuff in Indy. When it comes to a lot of a hot button issue is void years, because I think it came out about Jalen Hurts' contract from Philly. is that a normal practice that a lot of agents or teams do with void years, if I'm even using that term correctly? And
I'm trying to figure out what that means.
yeah, I guess there's something came out where his contract, let's say it's 100 million split over 5 years, but I guess the bulk of it is
Mhm,
actually in the first three, and then it's spread out over further than that. And we can leave this
mhm.
part off if we don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I'm not sure. Are there like really weird practices with negotiating, or is it pretty standard
Oh,
across the league now?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There are some. There are the biggest one that I've seen, and when I think about contract negotiations, that has kind of been like a thorn in the side of a lot of teams. Is a no trade clause. Um, Eating salary cap for a player that you can't really shift, get rid of is it's eating them alive, right? Because that the cap is really what dictates their what they can do in their draft. So if you are, there are some weird negotiations like that, but there's some other crazy things like, hey, I want my family to always have a box at the game, right? I want my family to always be transported. I always got to have a presidential suite at the team hotel. It's a lot of stuff. I got to have special meals. There's some crazy things I've heard in contract terms, but it's a front loaded contract is not unusual because you want to be able to optimize the best years of their life, of their game time. Um, and I was hearing today, and this is so relevant to the Rams right now, um, with the restructure, like was Stafford stay with a restructured
Yeah,
contract. Well, if you look at his contract, and I may be talking out of turn here, but I just throw it out there.
please share.
I don't know, even with the restructure, I don't think that it's going to work for the long term
Hmm.
because it is such a heavy contract.
Yep.
So you can restructure for year one to get what you need on on the Rams, right? But what happens as you restructure for those further years out? He'll be in a situation where he'll have to keep restructuring his contract. And that's probably not going to be the best situation. And so I believe that's why this is my assumption. I believe that's why the Rams are probably making the decision together with staff just to say, hey, it's probably going to make more sense for you to keep what you have and go elsewhere rather than us constantly every year we're in this constant renegotiation of the contract or kind of restructuring the contract.
Yeah, we had a our live stream this morning. We had that heart to heart talk with fans of it feels like a pending breakup. Like feels like your
Yeah.
girlfriend hit us with a text of hey, we need to talk. Like that's the stage we're at right now. But
Yeah, I love the Rams though. I love the
mm,
Rams. Of course, I love the Rams because Zay is over there. McVay. That Rams front office has just been. I actually connected with them last night a little bit and here at the combine, and they just always so gracious. They're a good team over there. So big Rams fan for life.
hey, if you listen to this, Les Snead, there's some guys that we're talking about today, and I think about minute 20 of this podcast that let's get them in the blue and gold. Let's get them over here.
Yeah, I think for sure, Rob, because Rams use a very interesting draft. Uh, how they're a non-combine team,
Yeah.
um, and because they're a non-combine team, they use a methodology as to how they find their
Mm.
guys, and it's worked for them. There's a few like that. There's two other teams that use the same concept, but the Rams is they're really good at it. So I know for a fact that based on the methodology that they use, Rob McDaniel is going to pop to the top of that chart.
Hey, well, we'll just put it this way: if Rob,
Now, I don't know if Rob is going to come to the Rams, but I know if they use their numbers, they use a lot of the testing numbers are big guideposts in height and size and wingspan, and they measure it all up. And then the game film, I think he would pop to that
from
list.
the little bit I've
It
seen,
is what I know
I
today.
think he'd fit in great, and I'll be first in line to order a McDaniel Rams jersey if that happens.
Yes, 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 for sure.
Well, I have exhausted my questions. That we're coming up on an hour. I promised, I think 30 to 45 minutes, and you were nice enough to give me double that. Thank you again. Where can everyone find you, and what's next on the list for you to knock out this off season?
Yeah, so you can find, I'm Lady Lib Sports and Entertainment. You can look me up at ladylib.com. You can fill out a form there if there's a need for representation or to get to know our team. I also have Lady Lib, LIB as in boy, 1922. Lady Lib 1922 on both X as well as Instagram. And this season, we're looking to get these 4 guys to their respective teams and have them in camp starting the second week of May. That's the goal.
I love it.
And then we're looking for our next guys. So if you're coming in to your last season, I want to talk to you. I want to meet you.
I love it. You heard it from here first. Follow Lady Lib. Thank you again for all the nuggets of knowledge. I feel smarter every time I talk to you. That's all I got for you. Thank you again.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much. I appreciate you always.
No problem.